you for staying, for joining this session. It is a little bit hard to give a talk after the keynote, but I will try. So we're going to discuss threat modeling and how to make it more effective, and I hope that will help all of us. So I'm not going to go into more of it, and just very briefly, I worked for Thales for many, many years, I won't mention, and currently I'm a software security architect. And I have worked in many different domains, and so I'm an inventor, have a couple of patents. So at Thales, we are, you may ask, what does Thales do, right? And this is the only slide we're going to mention about the company based on the OWASP rule. And in the division I'm in, we provide software, we develop software and provide services for identity and access management, for data protection, data security, key management, and application protection. The software, mostly software. We do have hardware, and we do work on firmware as well. And for software security, we have we call it software security assurance plan. And so among the security assurance plan, as Tanya has mentioned, the threat modeling is important part for our risk management. And we have been doing threat modeling for many, many years. So that we have received very valuable benefits. We'll see it briefly. In recent years, there are a lot of things have changed, as we all know. From the technology-wise, the technology has changed very rapidly. So the way we develop software have changed as well. From the company perspective, I'm sure in all your organization as well, our product portfolio becomes much more diverse, much more sophisticated. And importantly, it depend on a very complex supply chains. And on the other hand, the engineering process have changed. We know in the old days we have like waterfall model, and we have very detailed requirements, very detailed specification, and design, architecture, and design, and so on and so forth. And in recent years, the engineering process have changed more agile. We have DevOps, and we have frequent releases. So on the engineering side, there are many changes. On the other hand, as we know, the threat landscape have changed. All their existing threat, their new threat, they are forever present, and new threats evolved very rapidly. And then we hear breaches, if not every day, very, very, very often. And some of the breaches, like recent AT&T breach, and this national public data, those breaches affect all of us. And I'm the unlucky ones. Whenever this kind of breach, and I'll receive alert, right? I have privacy monitoring from different companies, and you receive alerts. So because both the engineering and the threat landscape have changed very rapidly, that make threat modeling more important, but more difficult. And the demand for threat modeling has really increased, while we still have limited resources. So now, how do we still build secure products, be able to do threat modeling effectively with limited resources? we've been asking ourselves these questions. So to address these questions, we have been doing some study in the past 2 years, looking at the other methodologies and the tools, and that help us to further improve the effectiveness of our threat modeling practices. So there's no time, it will take a long time to review each of the detailed methodologies. We have looked at each of the tools. Here I will share some of the important topics that we feel that will be helpful for us as well as for, hopefully, for all of you to improve the effectiveness. And just a note, this talk is not about how to do threat modeling, but it's how to make it more effective. So may I ask you to raise your hand if you have done threat modeling? Okay. All right, thank you, thank you. So we have a number of people and some other, we also have some who have not done this before. So to accommodate, I will give a very brief introduction about at least some terminologies about threat modeling, and then we'll go into, in practice, how can we make it work for your organization. You may have a small organization, or you may have a big organization. And Thales is a big organization, and we do threat modeling in our for all the product line, for all the products and all the services. How do we make it work, right? So what is the threat modeling? There are many definitions. I will just pick up one that's from NIST. Even NIST itself, many documents, it may define it slightly differently. For this particular one, it says it's a form of risk assessment that models aspects of attack and defense, models both sides. Of a logical entity, it can be data, can be application, can be a host, it can be a system, or can be a environment. You also hear about threat model. Okay, so what is a threat model then? We have threat modeling and the threat model, right? The threat model you can think of as an outcome of the threat modeling activity. It's a structured description of the findings, basically. It can include your description of your system, the security objectives, what do you want to achieve, and then what do you want to protect. And then we analyze the system and identify potential threats, and then importantly, it's the mitigation. Basically, we identify these threats, so what are we going to do about it, right? You can, for your threat model, it's basically a record. You can record it in many, many different ways. For example, you can write a Word document, right? And you can draw some pictures, or if you're using online, you'll use Confluence, it can be a Confluence page, and many different ways. So you can have drawings, pictures, or combination of those. I will show you some simple examples. Here is a fun example of Batman. So we can see on the one side we have threat agents. In this case, we can have police, the Joker, the journalist. In certain aspects, it's a threat agent. On your left-hand side, it's assets, right? We have the house, we have Alfred, and the emails and the text. And in the middle, there are security controls. Then those lines, they are potential threat from threat agent to the assets. The different kind of line indicate different level of risks. And threat modeling is not new. People have been doing there for several decades. Here is an old picture we found in a journal that was published in 1979, and then we can see a computer system, and we can see this little human figure, their potential threat agents, and we can see all the different threats. And here is a more modern ones. In this picture, we can it listed the assets, the yellowish, and the threat agents, and the default controls. Then for the actual identified threats is described because there's many of them, and there are details described in the documents. Why threat modeling? Why it is important, right? And it helps for our risk management. We have to identify threats in order to know what to prevent or what to mitigate. Not all the threats can be completely eliminated, but at least we want to reduce the impact. And the output of threat modeling can also provide input for business decisions. I remember sometime years ago, and once my boss asked me saying, can you just take a look at this company? Why do I have to take a look at the company? I'm quite busy. He said, well, basically they plan to buy a... Okay.
Speaking of AI.
Yeah, right. Because the plan was to buy a small company that provide a certain security features which our system are lack of. So I only have limited amount of time because they want to sign a contract. I looked at it and identified some serious security, actually fundamental security issues. So, and then also when we do threat modeling, we identify the issues. We also want to provide solutions. What can we do to fix it, right? I explained, I had my report, and then you can see the cost and benefit. The benefit is you buy a new a new feature that can really add to your products. And the cost is to fix these security issues. By the end, they decide not to buy it. When you do the risk, when you do make business decision, consider cost and the benefit, it's not worth it. So the threat modeling is very important to help your business make decisions. And it is also very important to help engineering to prioritize and schedule to implement security controls, right? And so as we mentioned in the example, it can save your time and the resource. If you identify the threats, you analyze the risk early, then that will help you to address it. It's much less time consuming and less expensive to address issues early. It also helps with the operations. Why does it help operations? Right. As we mentioned, not all the threats can be completely eliminated. The threats are still there. You can have security controls. For example, you can have firewalls, you can have lock on your doors, but the threats are still there. And if you do the threat modeling, you know what threats are you facing. Then you know what to monitor, right? What to detect. It also helps to prepare the response strategies. What if that happens? What are we going to do, right? So how are we going to do the threat modeling, right? And so we'll go through this by a simple example as we use IAM, Identity and Access Management, as an example. So we have a system that can allow user log in. For example, on a relying party, meaning it's a third-party services. It does not have its own authentication service. It will use a identity provider to help log in. So you will see this. Sometimes you want to log in a particular service, and it asks you, it gives you a list. You can either create an account, Or you can use Google, you can use Apple, you can use other vendors' authentication service to help you log in. So this is that kind of scenario. The identity provider, it has a database of users' identities and attributes. So let's take a simple example to see how we can do threat modeling. There are some very basic process. It can be a 1 week training or days of training, but we'll just talk about very abstract level. So the first step, we have to know the context, what we want to do threat model, right? What we want to assess. So you have your security objective. For example, in this case, one security objective is we need to protect the PII, personally identifiable information, because we have an IAM system that we need to protect its confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Those are your objectives. Then we can have some assumptions. When you do threat modeling, you can expand it very, very quickly. So you do want to have some assumptions. What do you assume it's secure? For example, you can, if you're saying we're doing the application level security, you want to focus on your application. You want to define scope. And very importantly, what are the assets you want to protect? So you can think of why there are threats, why threats exist, especially for our systems. Threats exist because there are assets, right? So bank has money. Someone wants to steal it, right? There's threats. If bank has no money at all, why people want to steal money from a place it doesn't have money, right? So it's very important to identify what you really want to protect. Those are assets. It can be data, or it can be your services. And then the next step, when you know what you want to protect, and the next step, you want to analyze your system. These two steps may be mixed together. You want to understand the usage of your system. What is the system for, right? In our case, we have IAM identity service. What does the system do? It does many things, but on a very basic level, it allows user it can verify the authenticity of the user, right? Can allow authentication. Want to know, so we want to also know the architecture at the different levels and the overall architecture. That's what we saw earlier, that's the overall. We also want to know a little, some level of details on the identity provider side. We want to know the data flow, the design, and so on. And then once we have a good understanding, we can try to identify what are the threat agents, threat actors, what are their motivations. In the bank example, the threat agent may be the external thief. Their motivation is to get money, get rich, right? That's an example. And we want to identify threats, vulnerabilities, and the threat scenarios. That once we do that, the last step is to propose security controls. So then how do we know what are the threats to a software system? How do we are builders, like many of us. We're builders and we're defenders. We're in the mindset to build a system, to defend our system. We're not in the mindset of attacking other people, right? So sometimes it's difficult how to find the threats. There are many ways. There are different approaches. One of the most commonly used approach is called STRIDE. STRIDE. STRIDE is represent the first letter of a category of threats, the most commonly seen threats that represent S is spoofing and tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, elevation of privilege. So these are the threat categories most commonly used. We see many of the tools, threat modeling tools, is still based on this. Even some AI-based threat modeling tools, commercial tools coming up, is still based on the STRIDE. Like, of course, it's also utilized many knowledge base, which we can see later. So these threat categories, they violate security properties. For example, spoofing violate the authenticity, and information disclosure violate confidentiality. In our example, the IAM example, that we identified that the assets include the PII, the personal information and authentication service. So if someone is able to steal the PII, we violate the confidentiality property of the PII. Okay, and we're not going to go into details. So that's one way to think about threat. You think about threat categories, or sometimes you're short on time. You think about CIA. That's another way to think about it. It's confidentiality, integrity, availability. Those are three very important, probably the most important security properties for your system. So if we come back to this, what are the potential threats? Think about the STRIDE, right? And the user, someone can spoof the user by stealing the username, password, or just randomly try different, or use tools to try different passwords. Right? And so the identity provider may be spoofed, and the third party, the application may also be spoofed. Then we mentioned about the database, right? And the database may be tampered, and may have somebody may be able to steal the data. For example, if the database is not encrypted, or if the access control is not properly implemented, the information may be disclosed. Then when we think about the control, in this case, for example, we'll encrypt the database, right? We apply the access control. And again, as we mentioned, how do we know all the threats? We can think about the STRIDE, we can think about the CIA. On the other hand, we can come out some attack scenarios. On the other hand, there are actually databases. There are all these different tools that can help us to look at the threats. Many of these databases, for example, KPAC, that's from MITA attack. They are based on and the CVE, you probably all heard of this. They are based on the real world exploitation. It's collected knowledge of real world exploitations. It's actually, these threats actually happened and they recorded. Then there also, like attack is more like a tree structure, and you can look into it. Even for for AI, we also will know the AI, there's also a lot of threat toward the AI systems as well. The last one, Meta Atlas, is similar as attack, is the threat to AI systems. And we also have documents from OWASP. ASVS is a very good document, and we can look at it. It's not a threat enumeration, but it describes the security controls on many different aspects. there are a lot of tools available as well. We're not going into all these tools, but there are open source tools. And if you have money, you can invest in commercial tools as well. These tools help us to identify threats when you give it a description of your system. It can generate, some of them can generate threats. Some of them help you to draw diagrams, for example, help you to identify threats. We have evaluated during our study recently, we have evaluated these tools. There are other tools. There are many other tools. And the thing is, the way we evaluate it, we define like about 24 of criteria. The thing is, none of all these tools, these are open source tools. They have its advantages. It help, and they also each one have different disadvantages. So you may want to try out. Even our own team, some people use a certain tool, some people don't use tool at all. So you want to choose the tool that really fit you. Now we have the basic concepts in place. We are going to talk about how do we improve practically, how do we make threat modeling more effective, make it workable to your organization. One thing is do threat modeling as early as you can. Don't wait to the end, because the later we are in the whole pipeline from development to production, the later you are to do threat modeling, the more expensive it could be. Imagine you already spend a lot of time build a particular feature, and up to the testing or to the production, that's worse. The customer identifies some security issues. If you want to address it, you have to go back to the development stage. That's much more expensive. Some time ago, I don't know how you call it, but we have product owners who have different, for each product, it has a product owner who owns this product from, not from the technical perspective, but from the business perspective. I got we call the PO, product owner, who contacted me. He said, hey, Karen, we're going to add a new feature. A customer required a new feature to our product. We are planning to implement in the next period, development period. So we're going to discuss in the planning session. And can you just take a look to look at this feature? It's requested by the customer. So we look at the new feature that proposed, and then identify potential threats. Then what we do is, I'm not going to elaborate. We do threat modeling, and propose controls, but it's not necessary we're going to implement those. There's an important step in our process. It's called, it's the risk assessment. When we identify threats, we also want to evaluate the risk of this potential threat, right? That will include the impact and the likelihood. I gave a talk last year about how to assess the risk, right? But in any case, we get back. So we identified the potential threats and assess the risk. The risk is actually medium. So we told the product owner, there are these threats and there are these risks. The risks are medium. Then we do not make business decisions, but the product owner can make a decision if or not to implement this. Then he considered the benefit. There's one customer requested this feature among thousands of customers of this particular product. Some others may also ask if you have this feature, right? But it's still a very small percentage. Then you consider that will introduce medium risk to the product. Is it worth it, right? They do cost and benefit analysis. At the end, they decided not to, he decided not to include this feature. So it takes about 30 minutes of our time, and that completely eliminated the whole process of design this feature and add this feature at the development phase and the implement and the testing and the staging and in the production, completely eliminated. So that's why we want to do threat modeling as early as you can, and it really involves with your team, right, at the start. I normally push to start your threat modeling at the requirement stage, right? In this example, it's at the requirement stage. You know, the product owners or product managers, they want to add certain things. These are the requirements, functional requirements. You want to look at those functional requirements to see what kind of threats, what kind of the risk these requirements may introduce. Right? So you want to do this as early as you can. And then, as I mentioned, in a large company, you have many products. Even in a small company, you can have, well, it's all relative, right? Many versus less, relative to the scale of your company. Then how do you scale your threat modeling? Right? The security champion is the answer, as Tanya said earlier. And I'm also a big fan of security champions. In Thales, we have a software security assurance program that defines many things that Tanya has described earlier, right? All the aspects, the basic security, we call the baseline requirement, basically security requirements, basic crypto requirements, and many things, the security requirements, security coding, and risk management, which include threat modeling. So it is important. We only have finite number of full-time security people. It's not possible to manage many business lines, within each business lines, there are product lines. Within the product lines, there's multiple products. Imagine we have a tree of products and services. So in order to implement and build security into the product and the services, we have security champions. Security champions, they are part-time security people. And at the very start, they are embedded in they are part of product teams, engineering teams. They still do they are still, for example, software developers or technical lead. They spend 30, let's just make it up, 30% of their time focusing on security issues. When we start the program, security champions are pretty much, we talk to managers, right? Pretty much assigned, right? The manager saying, okay, this person is more security conscious, he's our security champions. And the other security champions are volunteer, right? People saying, well, I'm interested, can I join your meeting, right? So we have built up a security champion. They are critical in implementing our security, implementing security and build security into the product. And then we get back to threat modeling. They are also security champions. They play an important role in threat modeling. We do threat modeling for all our products, right? So we rely on security champion. We actually went through a journey. When we start, it's the security architects, people like me, will do the security, will do threat modeling, do risk assessment for major products. Again, as you can imagine, it's not scalable, right? I'll do one you have to understand understand this, what does products do, and what is the architecture, what is the design, what is the protocol, and how crypto is implemented, and so on. You have to understand many things, right? And so it takes time. What you can do, you do one major product, and then you move to the next one. At this time, the other one keeps changing, right? And you move to the next one, the previous two keeps changing, right? You don't, it's very difficult. So the next step, what we did is we train security champions to do threat modeling. What we do is for a product, for example, we'll still do threat modeling for the product, but we lead it and have a security champion involved, and then have them trained up. And then once they have done, most of the time, once they actually have done it once, they can continue, they can do it. Then they lead their product team to do threat modeling, and then we review. Now and then when they get so mature, we don't even have to review unless there is major issues. That, of course, that depend on, we have many engineering teams that depend on the maturity of the engineering team. So some team we still do threat modeling, some team we only need to check with the security champion. It's very important. And the security champion, another aspect, they have deep knowledge of the product because they are part of the engineering team. They know what's going on, even if for a certain part they don't know, and they can talk with their team to figure it out. They have deep knowledge of it. Another aspect is when you work with security champions, we are all different, right? And so when you work with people who are very different of you, and there can be new ideas, can be more diverse ideas from different aspects, right? So there's just so many advantages of working with security champions. And Tanya also mentioned that another thing is actually build a relationship, right? When it's very important when you do threat modeling, it is the opportunity for you to work with the security champions, with the product managers, with the engineering lead, with the product architects. When we do threat modeling, it's not just the security champions. We actually work with the team, and it's very so. Another important, I just thought of. It's not in any of the slides. And another important aspect is really you need to know your product managers, your product owners. They have to understand all this security stuff. You don't have to train them about security coding. However, in our training, when we do risk assessment, we do threat modeling training, we have security champions as well as product owners, right? By the end, they have to make decisions. So it's very important to work with your engineering teams. Sometimes it's very, it's very difficult to actually start this threat modeling session. And in the old days, before pandemic, I'll go to a different site. We have people, working around the world, and even in US, people in different places, East Coast. So we do the threat modeling training. It's better to face, right? And then during pandemic, and after pandemic, we do threat modeling workshop. And then you have people, many senior people on the phone. Most people don't like to turn on their camera. You don't see them, and yourself, you're just talking. You have no idea how things are going, right? And when you say, okay, let's try to identify, we analyze system threats, and you hear silence, right? Well, I had experience, and then I had to stop the session. I'll say, okay, they want to think about it. We go back, we'll think about it. So the next session, I thought I will start differently. Instead of following all those processes, I just say, I give you 5 minutes. Just type in what concerned you the most. And then people start very quickly just typing in from chats, all over. And then 5 minutes, I say, well, 5 minutes are over. And then people say, well, can we have another 5 minutes? And then people just keep typing. In 10 minutes, we have all those security concerns. That's how the threat modeling really started. So starter questions is actually quite useful. You can ask, what assets do we need to protect? What do you concern the most? What's the worst case scenario? Ask all some questions, and the people can help people to start thinking. Another thing I want to mention is called rapid threat modeling. It's kind of Mozilla's rapid risk assessment. So we basically include very short threat modeling discussions embedded in team meetings, involve everyone in the team meeting, right? And they have discussions like 10 minutes, 15 minutes. We just discuss, the team meeting is discussing some topics they want to implement or they want to fix, embedded in the team meetings. And then the benefit is you identify the threats early and very quickly. And you focus on specific topics. For example, this team meeting is talk about a specific feature or talk about a specific flow change. Maybe it's only a UI change, right? And we want to spend some minutes to discuss. In this change, introduce new security threats. This introduce new risk to us, right? Very quick discussion. If we can resolve, that's great. Otherwise, we have dedicated sessions to address it. It's important. Make it as a habit at every your team meetings and think about it. These things we're going to do, will that introduce a potential threats? And we want to align with DevOps. One thing I found it's useful is I'm not quite sure how your works, but in our organization, we have task tracking tools. You define all the tasks, and in the task tracking tools, we can link the threat modeling artifacts with the tracking tool. And also in the planning, they call the user stories, right? In writing the user story, include the security concepts. Sometimes, because there are so many things the engineer need to do, when they prioritize, they may lower the priority of some security tasks because it does not increase the feature that the product owner wants to do. One way to do it is using without clause in your user story. For example, you can say, I want to be able, a banking application, I want to be able to pay online without my credit card number being disclosed, right? Using the without clause, that could be an effective way. So I was talking about, okay, I'm going to skip this. An important concept is called inherent threats that Adam Schustock had also talked in the last threat ModCon. So some threats are accidental, some threats are inherent. So for example, a misconfiguration, and so that misconfiguration that lead like data leakage, for example, those are accidental. That's not intrinsic, not inherent in your system. Some other threats it's inherent. We talk about the banking, right? Bank has money. There's inherent threats. The money be stolen. That's an inherent threat. And we all use emails, right? We send information. There are assets. There are threats. Somebody wants to may want to read your email. Your email may have sensitive information. So you use your email system has inherent threat of email being stolen. As we mentioned earlier, whenever there's assets, there are threats, right? Wants to steal or disrupt, want to tamper the assets. Those are inherent threats. Knowing what threat is inherent or accidental, it's important for several aspects. Inherent threats requires more analysis and modeling efforts. They are inherent in the system. On the other hand, it may require risk acceptance. Business accept risk all the time. If you want to have a banking app, right? You have your inherent threats that the money being stolen during the transfer or during the at rest. If you want to completely eliminate, then you just don't do it, right? That's you completely. So you may reduce the risk, but you have to accept risk at a certain level. So that help to define what types of defense. In accidental threat, you can have preventive measures. And the inherent threat, we can still use preventive measures to reduce the risk, but we also want to focus on detection and on the response. On the other hand, it will also help us to do scale the threat modeling. Okay, so I'm going to skip. I talk too slow. But this is the last. I think we have been doing threat modeling, at least for me, for 10 years with our organization. But we want to continuously improve. What is important, the threat modeling is not a one-time deal. You want to continue to review and update until your product ends, right? Because your product keeps changing, you want to continue update. And we want to learn from each other and get someone else, like other business line may ask me to review their threat model. And learn and try new method. Join a community. There's this community, it's called Threat ModCon. And join a community. The Threat ModCon, normally their meeting is associated with OWASP, Global AppSec. Okay, I was to talk about the AI. Let's forget about the AI. So and the takeaway, it is threat modeling is a critical process in systems, the entire life cycle. Don't think about you can do it once. It's important until your product ends, until nobody, even your product ends, some people are still using your product. It may still be your responsibility. And you really want to prioritize and allocate the resources. And there are many methodologies and many tools. Take time to look at some of them, choose the one that best fit your need. And another aspect, another point is you can adopt different methods. Depend on the context. Even in one product, at a different stage of the product lifetime, system's lifetime, you can use different methodologies and different tools. Thank you.